Om Ya Devi Stuyati Nityam Vibhudai Vedaparagegi Same Vasadaji Kuagre Brahmarupa Saraswati Om Sthapakaya Cha Dharmasya Sarvadharmaswarupine Avatara Varisthaya Ramakrishnaya Te Namaha. So, there's something. Begin. Now, today's subject is Sama Veda. This is the third in that chronology of Vedic tradition. And unlike the chanting of Rigveda and Yajurveda, this Samhita section of the Sama Veda is normally set to music with lengthened notes, in fact. So, Samaveda hymns are in praise of various deities like Agni, Indra, Varuna, Soma, and so on. Now, just since we have been discussing Rigveda and Yajurveda earlier, so I would say something in connection with Samaveda. Now, the word Saman itself means Rig mantras or mantras from Rigveda set to musical tone is called Saman. In other words, a large portion of the mantras in Samaveda are actually taken from Rigveda, but set to musical tone. Now, there is an elaborate description of this, the way it is set to musical tone. In certain books dealing with the phonetics and phonology pronunciation of the musical elements of Samaveda. And those books are called Siksha. Siksha means the science of phonology or pronunciation or phonetics. There are many Sikshas that we are going to discuss. Of all these important works on the Samaveda music, Naradiya Siksha, or a book on phonetics written by a sage called Narada, is the most celebrated one. It's called Narada Siksha or Naradiya Siksha, Gautamiya Siksha. Gautama was the name of a saint, and Narada also was the name of a saint. This Narada, the sage Narada, the author of Naradiya Siksha, may not be the same great saint or sage whom we read about in certain Puranic works like Bhagavata Purana or Mahabharata, or in many of the ancient Hindu Vedantic mythological books, you hear about one great saint called Narada. Even in the Chandogya Upanishad itself you find Narada. So that Narada may be a different person, but this Narada was a specialist on the phonetics of Samaveda. It's called Naradiya Siksha. So he gives a clue to the musical science of Samaveda. There is a well-known definition is Saptaswaraha Trayi Grama Murchnastu Eka Vimshatihi Tana Ekona Panchasat Ityedat Swaramantalam. What he means is Rig mantras or Rigveda mantras, when tuned to music, incorporating Saptaswaras, means 7 swaras, 7 musical notes. And today, in the course of conversation, one of our senior American Swamis was mentioning that The European music derived its saptaswaras from the Greek tradition, and maybe it be quite appropriate to assume that the Greek music itself was influenced by this ancient musical tradition, because Naradiya Siksha actually belongs to 13th century BC, and Sama Veda is much more ancient. And Naradiya Siksha and Gautamiya Siksha, all these phonetical works deal with the pronunciation and the musical elements of Sama Veda. So Sama Veda is much more ancient. So according to Narada, there are 7 swaras, 7 musical notes, and 3 grammas, scales of music, lower range, middle range, and top range, respectively, called Mandasthayi, and then Madhyamasthai and Tarasthai, etc. Plus 21 murchnas, 21 variations of the notes in an orderly manner. So, please remember, 7 musical notes which are very common. You know, ma, ga, ri, sa, ni, da, pa. Prathama is Madhyama is ma, Titiya is ga, Tritiya is ri, Chadurtha is sa, Panchama is ni, Shashta is da, and Saptama is pa. Maybe this may be interpreted, presented in a different way in the ancient Greek music, from which European music must have derived its origin. So these 7 musical notes plus 21 variations of the notes in an orderly manner, and 49 thanas mean protracted notes. Now, I'm myself not a professional musician, but those of you who may be accomplished musicians may be able to make better sense of this than those who have no musical background. So what it means is, in short, what it means is Sama Veda is nothing but the Rig Veda mantras set to musical notations. But you should remember, Sama Veda is not all about music alone. The most important Mahavakyas dealing with the fundamental principle, philosophy of Advaita, non-dualistic philosophy, it comes in Chandogya Upanishad, which is actually from Sama Vedic tradition. So that is an important thing to remember. We are here only talking about the Samhita portion of Sama Veda. And those who used to chant these mantras according to musical tones were called Udgata. Udgata itself means the one who sings. That's what it means. Okay, now coming to the subjects. The word Saman itself, as I mentioned, the etymological meaning of the word Sama is that which is a sweet music which destroys all sorrow. That's the real meaning of Sama itself. So, Sama Veda was considered to be the sweetest and the most exalted form of Vedic recitation. So you find in certain post-Vedic literature like Bhagavad Gita, you find, Vedanam Samavetosmi. So Lord Krishna, in one of his, in one of the, one section, the Gita, he talks about, among the Vedas, he meant the Lord, among the Vedas, I am Sama Veda. Means Rishibhi Bahudha Geetam Chandobhi Pibidhai Prathak Rishibhi Bahudha Geetam. So this ancient spiritual reality is being sung by the ancient sages in so many different ways. So here also you find the Atman, the absolute reality, as being sung, praised through beautiful musical tones by ancient sages. Sama Vedascha Vedanam, Mahabharata also he says, among the Vedas, Sama Veda is the most exalted one. Now, among the while singing these Rig mantras as Sama, which is set to music, there are certain changes in letters of the text to facilitate singing. So that's very important, because Rig mantras, if you listen to Rigveda mantra, Rig Samhita chanting, you don't find long elongated tones, you don't find notes, elongated notes you don't find. But if you listen to a Rudgata chanting Sama Veda Samhitas in a yajna or a Vedic ritual, you find some of them hold their breath for a very long time. I can again refer to you to the well-known book, because that is the only authentic work, perhaps in English language, which actually elaborately describes the music of the Vedas. That is the well-known book by Fritz Stahl, who used to go to India. Many times he went and he participated in Vedic rituals. He himself studied Sanskrit to the extent it was possible, because in India they chant, they study these Vedic notations, Vedic music right from their infancy. Maybe from 5th or 6th year they begin their Vedic education. They memorize these things by family tradition. But somebody born outside India, too in a Western country, he was a Dutchman who later taught in Berkeley University. So he wrote this well-known book, Agni, in 2 big volumes, where he gives elaborate descriptions. There he tries to give examples of these musicians, Samavedic musicians, holding their breath for a long time. I mean, why and how these saptaswaras, these 7 notes of musical notes and the scales of music, 3 grammas, 3 scales of music, the lower range, middle range, and then the top range, and again these variations of these musical notes and protracted notes, long, elongated protracted notes were sung by them, and you can find some descriptions from this well-known book, Agni. Now, while singing these Rig mantras in the Samavedic tradition, they used to introduce certain changes in the letters of the text to facilitate singing. This is called Vikara, changing the letter of the word. For example, Agne becomes Ognayi, you find. Of course, this is not the way it is chanted. I am putting things in prose, not in music, of course. Again, Visleshana, separating a word. They used to separate words to facilitate accommodating to the musical signs. And Vikarshana, lengthening and varying a note. For instance, Ye becomes, Ya, Ye, etc. Sometimes they used to lengthen the vowel and consonants. Vowels and consonants are not exactly the words to be used to explain this, but perhaps I don't know of any English equivalent to explain this. So, Vikarshana, then Abhyasa, repetition of a word. Then Virama, stopping near a word for slight rest, and for example, and then continuing. Now, again, Stobha, certain letters used to embellish singing, like Au, Hova, etc. Now there are 5 fundamental steps in singing every Sama. They are called Prastava, Udgita, Pratihara, Upadrava and Nithana. Prastava means it is the beginning of a mantra. Prastatra, a priest begins with the sound Hum, etc. And then Udgita, the main priest. So Udgata is a person who represents Sama Vedic tradition in any Vedic ritual. So this is something to be kept in mind. In all major Vedic rituals, there will be 4 priests. There will be sometimes on some occasion there may be dozens of Vedic scholars. In some cases maybe 100 or more. But there will be 4 fundamental representative priests, each representing one Veda. Hota is the representative of Rigveda. Adharyu is the representative of Yajurveda. Udgata is the representative of Samaveda. And Brahma is the representative of Brahman, sometimes is of Atharva Veda. Udgata itself means somebody who sings loudly. Now, there were 5 fundamental steps. So, Udgata used to sing, and the main priest, that is Udgata, sings this particular, beginning with Om, Prastada, and then Upadrava, Nithana. Now, these things become obvious to a listener only if he is familiar with the technical details of the Sama Veda, which right now it's beyond our scope to explain, but I shall try to give a brief summary of some of these, some aspects of the Sama Vedic tradition. Sama Veda, apart from a great musical work, which I am going to deal with elaborately later as a great source of music, I shall later give an elaborate description of the phonology of Sama Veda. But before that, I want to say a few things about the subsidiary texts of Sama Veda. So the list of these Brahmanas, Sama Veda has got 8 Brahmanas, it's called. Aitireya, Devadadhyaya, Praudha, Tandya Mahabrahmana, Shadvinsha Brahmana, Samavidhana Brahmana, Samhitopanishad Brahmana, Talavakara Brahmana, Upanishad Brahmana, Vamsha Brahmana. So these are the Brahmana texts. These texts explain in detail the performance of the rituals mentioned in the Samaveda tradition, of which Tandya Mahabrahmana is considered to be the most important one. Talavagara Brahmana and Tandya Brahmana are frequently, very commonly used in modern times. As I mentioned earlier, 2 of the important Upanishads that Shankaracharya commented upon, expounded to establish his Advaita philosophy belong to Samaveda tradition. One is Chandogya Upanishad, the other is Kena Upanishad. Now coming to the most important part of our discussion, Siksha. Before that, a few more important details I want to give. There is a belief, and this is a very interesting aspect of studies in Samavedic tradition. It's a very interesting aspect. There is a belief that Samaveda had a large number of branches which right now are not available. So it is believed that many branches have been lost. So there are references in certain textbooks. Samaveda had 1000 shakhas, it's called. Sahasravatma, it is called. Means that is an interesting tradition. Ashtohi Brahmana Grantha Prauda Brahmana Madidam Shadvishakyam Titiyam Sya Tas Sama Vidhir Bhaved Ashayam Devadadhyayo Bhaved Upanishad Tadaha Samhido Upanishad Vamsho Grantha Ashtau Idida. Means that these are the verses that actually give a list of the Brahmana text which are now available. Now coming to Siksha. That is an important subject today. Before explaining the Siksha, the phonology of Sama Veda, we should know what it is. Now, apart from the 4 Vedas, we should remember there were 6 Vedangas. One is Siksha, Vyagaranam, Chandasa, Niruktam, Jyotisham, Kalpam. Which means phonetics, Siksha, then grammar, prosody, etymology of Vedic words, astronomy or astrology, and the description of rituals. So these were the 6 branches. It's called Vedangas, the limbs of Vedic studies. So in order to be able to perform Vedic rituals and to sing the Sama Veda mantras properly, one should be familiar with the science of phonetics and phonology, the pronunciation, as explained by the great sages like Narada, Gautama, etc. So the 4 important texts on Sama Veda phonetics are Naradiya Siksha, Gautamiya Siksha, Lomasa Siksha and Paniniya Siksha, of which Naradiya Siksha is considered to be the most authentic because he is the one who explains the science of turning Rigveda mantras into Sama Veda. And then Lomasa was another sage, Gautama was another sage, Panini was the original exponent of Sanskrit grammar. Now we shall discuss a few things about Naradiya Siksha. In one context, Narada explains how one should chant these Veda mantras. Nabhya ivattar nirhanya prayoga na kampaye samam samani gayeda vyomni senagati ratha yadhapsu charadam margo meenanam nobalabhyade akasi va vihanganam tadva suragata sudhi. Suragata sudhi, I mean the harmony and the melody and the overall effect of Samaveda music is compared to Akaseva Vihanganam, means the birds flying in the sky. So there should be absolutely no friction, there is a smoothness, a spontaneity, an effortlessness, something extremely natural and effortless. And there is a beauty and charm if you observe the way a bird flies in the sky. Not when it is flying away, scared by somebody, but its natural flight in the air. That should be the tone of an Udgata, a person, a priest who sings Sama Ganam. It's called Sama Ganam. It's a music in Vedic performance. And again, Yadhapsu Charadam Margo Meenanam Nopalabhyate. Again, how a fish slowly, effortlessly moves in water. So there are many, Yatha Dadhani Sarpisyad Kashtasto va Yathanala. Again, how a crawling reptile moves in effortlessly. and also how a fire gradually envelops a piece of wood slowly. So that means the spontaneity, the natural effortlessness. Now, this is accomplished when a musician follows these principles. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the Swaramandalam. Swaramandalam is the combination of the Saptaswaras, 7 notes, then Trigramas and variations, 49 variations. When all these are properly done, the music will be harmonious, spontaneous and natural and effortless. That's why the old definition still is very important. As I mentioned earlier, the Saptaswara Trigrama, means 7 swaras, the 3 scales of music, the lower range, the middle range, the top range, and 21 variations of the notes in an orderly manner, and even 49 protracted notes, all centering around Saptaswaras. So this is the method of singing Saman. Of course, I cannot demonstrate it right now because it's all long years back. So right now I don't, so I cannot demonstrate it right now. Now, again, interestingly, a person is able to reach this level of perfection of Sama Veda music only when that person leads a pure life. And that is a very interesting instruction that comes again, it is Naradiya Siksha. An orderly, disciplined life, a strong faith in God, and a total dedication to the Vedic Parampara, all these are important for acquiring proficiency in Samagana. So the importance of ethical values in attaining music, because Narada says music can take you straight to God. There are statements in Naradiya Siksha, and there are also statements in the Gautamiya Siksha. It says, real music is divine and spiritual, and there is that divine music can take you to a transcendental level that transcends the world of tones and sounds, and can take you to a higher inner spiritual experience. That's what Narada says. So, music is not just what you hear. Music is also what you experience within you, and that experience is beyond the reach of the words, but words are the means to reach that level of experience which actually transcends the world of words, the world of sounds. That's why Narada quotes this from Shiva Samhita. Dyudam pustagamadyam cha nadakeshu cha sakti kata striyastandra cha nidra cha vidya vignagarani shat. So, vidya vigna means obstacles to vidya. Vidya means knowledge, proficiency in an art or science called vidya. So it's called vidya vignani. So gambling, and then depending on a written word while singing. So if you sing always focusing on a written word, your posture and your vocal cords all will not be functioning. So real music is something in which a musician identifies himself with the music. And then, of course, too much of sleep and other unchanged habits are considered to be great obstacles to reach, a great obstacle for a person who wants to master proficiency in the Sama Vedic music. That's the idea behind. Again, this can be learned only by an astute, devoted student who learns from a teacher. So, some of the Siksha Grantha, Siksha works compare this, you can transmit a flame from only one lamp to another lamp. When the two lamps should come together, you should have a wick in your hand, and that wick should touch the flame from another lamp. Then only the flame will be transferred to the candle that you are holding. Then your candle also get lit. Like that, the science of this spiritual music should be learned from a teacher by a student who goes on digging a field, digging the ground, and as he digs more and more, he gets more out of this. Very interesting Sanskrit sloga here. Yatha khanan khanitrena bhutale vari vintadi evam gurugadam vidyam sussushu radhigacchati. That's also Shiva Samhita, it says, So yatha khanan khanitrena bhutale vari vintadi. So you get water when you go on digging on the same spot carefully, then you get water. Like that, you should go on learning from the teacher by politely listening to him, and that's why we said, you should get the flame transferred from one burning lamp to another lamp. Then only the other lamp will become a burning lamp. Then only it will be able to transmit light. Sama Veda also contains lot of philosophical ideas. Tantya Mahabhramana says Prajapatirva idameka asi soka mayada bhagusyam prajayedi sayeda maritrama vashyat etc. Prajapatirva ekamevasi naharasi niratriasi etc. I'm not going to give an elaborate description. There are mantras in Sama Veda tradition which are highly Advaitic and highly philosophical. So you find some of the most well-known hymns found in Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, are also found in Sama Veda. Purusha Sukta, Purusha E Vedam Sarvam Yad Bhudam Yitcha Bhavyam etc. This is mantras coming in Sama Veda being interpreted by great commentators like Sayana, Yadibi Satyam Jnanamanantam Brahma iti Anandasya Brahmanaga Padajadushtayam Nirupayidam Ashakyam Tathabi Jagadidam Brahma Rupapekshya Alpamidi Vivakshatvad. So you find the highest Advaita philosophy is also implied here. This world is Alpamidam, means it is the Jagat, the external world is changing, so it is not the absolute reality, it is only relative, it is mithya. So all these classical Advaita ideas are also found in the Sama Veda Samhita mantras. Again, there is a Tantya Mahabhramana, the most important Brahmana of Sama Veda. Prajapatirva idameka asi soka mayada bhusyam prajaye iti etc. The creation is described here as the absolute reality entering the Atman itself. So you find. Now, the great commentators of Sama Veda are Madhava Pandita, Guna Vishnu, Bharata Swami, Sayana, Surya Devajna, Shobhakara Bhatta. These are some of the great commentators on Sama Veda Samhita. The importance of Sama Veda is not just in the context of performing rituals, but also it actually it contains the genesis of human endeavor to set words to music. And again, the Siksha literature, like I already mentioned, Lomasa Siksha, Gautamiya Siksha, Narada Siksha. These books on Sama Veda phonetics teach that the music, when properly sung, when a Rit mantra set to music properly and sung properly by a spiritual seeker who lives a very ethical life, it becomes a means to reach God. It takes us beyond the world of words. It means Shabda Prapanchat Ati Tattva. There is a statement in the Narada Siksha. It takes you beyond Shabda Prapancha. So, music has two aspects. One is the music that you hear, that others hear. When you sing, others hear. That is the world of words. I mean, the music that we hear. There is another kind of music that is experienced by a musician in his own inner world, and that will be shared by a listener whose mind is tuned to the same vibration of music. So music becomes a tool, a means to reach the highest spiritual experience. So that is a brief description of Sama Veda Samhita. I'm not going to give you anything more about the Upanishad, the philosophy, because we already discussed Kenopanishad and Chandogya Upanishad in this context. But something very interesting that comes in the Upanishad literature that I can mention, it says every music has two dimensions, as I mentioned. From another perspective, it has got two other dimensions. One is what you hear, the other is what you don't hear. What you don't hear is universal. It is called Samanya. What you hear is specific. One is the audible dimension, the other is the inaudible dimension of the music. The inaudible, the transcendental dimension of music can be appreciated by anyone who doesn't know even the language in which a hymn is set to music. You need not know the language of a great musician to appreciate the greatness of his music, because that music is transcendental. It touches the hearts of every listener. Even a person who doesn't understand the language in which the music is set, he will be able to appreciate that music, because that music is a transcendental dimension of music. Now we can have interactions, because this is a brief description, maybe within about 40-50 minutes. Now you can have discussion. I am not elaborating the philosophical aspects of Sama Veda, because we already discussed Kena Upanishad and Chandogya Upanishad, which are two important Upanishads coming in the Sama Vedic tradition that we already discussed earlier.
Hariom Swamiji. I have a question regarding the content.
Yeah.
In Sama Veda, so obviously Sama Veda has a musical component to it, but is it fair to say that the classical Indian music was born in the Sama Veda?
Yeah, in fact, that's the general belief. It is a well established fact. So all classical Indian musicians admit that the Saptaswaras, the seven Saptaswaras, the fundamental, seven fundamental notes, are first mentioned clearly in Naradiya Siksha, which precedes Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra. Bharata Muni's Natya Shastra was written much later, actually.
Interesting, Swami.
Yeah.
Also, another question was, so we discussed in detail about Naradiya Siksha. What else do Lomasha, Gautama and Panini add to what Narada says about the Sama Veda?
Yeah, Naradiya Siksha is important because it is the most elaborate and it clearly defines the musical element in Sama Veda tradition. Paniniya Siksha is important, but Paniniya Siksha is relevant for all other Vedas also. And Naradiya Siksha is more elaborate, maybe the oldest also. There is not much in other Siksha Granthas which Narada has not touched upon. That's the reason.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Panini was a grammarian, so Siksha was not his primary contribution, to Vedic literature. Yes.
And just a question, because I think I missed this while noting this down. You said Hoda is for Rig Veda,
Yeah.
Uggata is for Sama Veda, and Brahman is for Atharvana Veda.
Yeah.
What is for Yajur Veda?
Adhiryu, yeah. In fact, that was the four representatives. There will be a number of other Vedic scholars singing, but Udgada represent maybe the senior most Vedic scholar present on a particular occasion where the Vedic ritual is performed. The senior most in the Sama Vedic tradition. Among the Sama Vedic scholars, or maybe the one whom the king has employed, because in ancient times, these were the ones, or maybe individuals also used to perform, these Somayaga and all that. So used to be employed, yeah. And there are special occasions when Udgada has to sing a particular rik, a particular mantra, on a particular occasion. So he should sing that also. Udgada was given a special importance because of the exalted position of Sama Veda on many Vedic rituals. Yeah. Those of you who know music, you can easily see, this. Actually, musical notes are the same. You find Prathama, Ditiya, Tritiya. You find Ma, Ga, Ri, Na, Sa, Ni, Da, Pa. Or you can find it. You can sing more or less. Again, that's something interesting. But more than that, there is something universal to music that transcends the boundaries of culture, nationality, or anything. Music is contagious in a very happy way. It is contagious, and it can be appreciated, as I mentioned, even by a person who is not trained in that music. If you read a profound book in prose, let us say, if the other person doesn't understand the language in which you are reading or the subject that you are discussing, the other person will not be able to appreciate it. But music, it goes beyond. Even vocal music also. I'm not talking about instrumental music alone. Even vocal music also has got this universal element in it. Because it touches the soul. And as Atman, it's the same for everyone. There is something within all of us that transcends the body, the mind, intellect, and all the external factors. And music touches that universal aspect, which is common to everyone. So very Shankaracharya's Bhashya says, Veena Vadana, he takes the example of the Yajnavalkya's dialogue, you find. Bhashya, Shankaracharya says, Veena Vadana, you're playing violin. Now, one is that there is a science in your music that will be appreciated by somebody who is trained in the science of music. But there is something deeper, and that will be appreciated by a person who doesn't know music. Now, what is that which makes him attracted towards this music? He doesn't know the language, he doesn't know the science involved in this, in the play of the violin or whatever it is. But then he listens to it. There are examples, in one of our ashramas in India, there is a big dairy actually, number of cows, milking cows. So they play music. Some music they play, and the cows listen to that. And that makes it easy for them to milk the cow. It happens in one of our centers in India. I myself have seen, if you want information, in one of our centers, the Ramakrishna Mission, near the Himalayas. Big dairy they have. So every day they play the music and the cows listen to that.
That's interesting, Swami.
So even cows have a sensitivity to music. I'm giving an example, So because there is something deep in music that is universal, that goes beyond words, that is universal, not only for even human beings, as I mentioned. There are being examples, if you play music, even plants grow better. That is something I'm not going to tell you things which people may question, but there is a belief that music influences nature. Sound vibrations have an unseen, invisible impact on environment and so on.
Thanks, Swami.
Yeah.
Maharaj, this is Bobby.
Yeah. You are yourself a musician and a poet. You are the best person to. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I very much appreciate the magnificent description you gave of the potential of music to reach everybody. The breadth of this Veda is remarkable because it not only gets into the micro level, the details of phonology, grammar, ritual, the details, but then also zooms out to the context, the larger environmental level of the astronomy, the situation, and of course the spiritual situation is both inner and vast.
Yeah.
So the idea that there are branches that we can only speculate on, that there were more references. Can you elaborate on that? Because it's not that important. We have what we need, but it is interesting that there was more that we may not have access to.
Yeah, right from the later half of 19th century, there was a search for forgotten manuscripts. So both Indian and Western Indologists and scholars used to go visit homes and old houses in search of manuscripts. By now they must have already procured all available manuscripts. But India is an ancient country and it had to go through many social, national cataclysms, invasions, uprooting of whole cultures. You see, Kashmir, to what is Afghanistan today, what is Pakistan today. These were all places where Vedas flourished for millennia. So like that, many other parts of today's India also, there were cradles of Vedic civilization. So many things must have disappeared. It's a wonder that many things do survive today. That's a greater wonder, really speaking. Now, of course, many of the manuscript libraries, British Museum manuscript libraries in different parts of the world, in Germany, London, many places. They have huge collections of manuscripts. Some of them yet remaining to be published. Manuscriptology is a science that I am not closely familiar with, but in many world Vedic Sanskrit conferences, they present papers on some newly discovered manuscripts. The Gautamiya Shakha, there are different shakhas, different branches. Jaiminiya Shakha, Kauthuma Shakha, Ranayani Shakha. These are the only three important shakhas which are now available. There must be many branches which are being lost. We have no idea about it. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
The question that comes up the most when I speak with the Indian-born musicians and the poets also is that the Westerners, their first impression is often that the music is repetitive, that it will repeat a phrase and do variations on that phrase in a spontaneous way that Westerners see as analogous to jazz music, other improvisational music. But what they're hearing is repetition, and only when they get more familiar do they realize that the variety is actually what's going on. Yeah. They hear a repeated phrase, but it comes with an enormous amount of variety, which this Veda elaborates on. And the other thing is, besides the variety, there's the participatory element. Yeah. People who go to, the Westerners who go to Indian musical performances suddenly discover that there's a call and response, that there's participation in many cases. And this is new for many Westerners. But what they then later come to discover is that it's not an external participation. Yeah. It's not like, we're being called upon to sing. Yeah. It's more that they're called upon to experience together with the performers how enveloping the musical experience is. Yeah. So these things just keep coming up, and I'm wondering if that's your impression also.
Yeah, it could be. And as in other areas of learning and branches of learning, music also was transmitted in families from generation to generation. So many of the methods, many of the special methods, special practices and discipline that prevailed in one particular school of music in one area was preserved by certain families who belonged to that particular school. This is true of musical traditions in South India and also North India. Even there are differences, there are minor differences. But what we mentioned here, the 7 fundamental notes, all these are common, which they all admit. And in course of time, from the Sama Vedic age, different families must have developed, or different Vedic communities must have developed different types of methodologies of music. That's all only possible explanation for the varieties. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Maharaj, there's some questions from YouTube if you
Yeah. There's a question from YouTube, that's one. Okay,
one question by Nanjunda Somayaji. Swamiji, there is a reference to Shiksha in Taittiriya Upanishad.
Yeah.
What is the relationship between the term in Taittiriya Upanishad and Shiksha that is referred to in Sama Veda?
Yeah. Gautamiya Siksha, Naradiya Siksha, these two, and Lomasa Siksha, these are specifically Samavediya Siksha granthas. And Taittiriya Siksha, Siksham Vyakhya Samaha Varnaswarga Matra Belam, they seem to be common, and especially in reference to the Taittiriya tradition, So when Siksha Vyakyasyamaha Varnasuraha Matra Balam Samasankhana, all these mantras that appear in the Sikshavalli of the Taittiriya Upanishad seem to be more general and especially relevant in the context of Taittiriya tradition. Yeah.
One more question, Maharaj. Ranga Prasad asks, Swamiji Namaskara, which is the best book for Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, Sanskrit shlokas with meaning? Please tell Ranga Prasad from Mysore.
Yeah. Patanjali Yoga Sutra. There are many books available in India, but I think Patanjali Yoga Sutra with Vyasa Bhashya and also Vivarana, Shankaracharya's Vivarana, Vijnana Bhikshu, all these are being translated into different Indian vernaculars, at least to Hindi. But in English, of course, there are a few translations of Vyasa Bhashya into English. For a beginner, I would always recommend Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga, because Swamiji's work is not just a translation, it is also an exposition of the spiritual psychology of Yoga Sutras. So some of the flashlights that Vivekananda throws into the intricacies of yoga, you don't find even the Vyasa Bhashya or Vijnana Bhikshu or in other classical commentaries. I mean Rajamartanda or anything. So I would say for a beginner, it's always to begin with Swami Vivekananda's translation. It's not only translation, but it is an introduction for the layman. And of course, we have around 144 Yoga Sutra classes in our YouTube. If you go to Vedanta Society, San Francisco YouTube, you get it is available in podcast also. That I have tried to give as elaborate as possible in exposition of Yoga Sutras in the context of modern psychology, but mostly based on Vyasa's commentary and Vijnana Bhikshu and Vajaspati and Rajamata and other commentaries. But though I quote from Sanskrit commentators, I give a freelance English interpretation as well. Thank you.
One more question,
Yeah.
Maharaj. From Srinivas Bharadwaj, Purusha Sukta has a reference to Trisapta Samidha Kritaha.
Yeah.
So the reference is Saptasyasan Parit.
Saptasya and yeah, with a Saptasya.
Kritaha Deva like that.
The Deva Yajna, yeah.
Is this related to Sama Veda?
No, this Purusha Sukta appears in all the four Vedas. Purusha Sukta is common to, especially three, what you call, Rig Veda, Yajurveda, Sama Veda. You find Purusha Sukta in all the three Vedas. And Sayanacharya's commentary is the most well-known one. It is purely Advaitic. Purusha is considered to be the reality, the absolute reality immanent in all of us. Purishete Purusha. This Shankaracharya's interpretation is taken by him. So Purusha is the immanent reality present in all of us. Purusha Sukta is, please remember, it is common to all the three important Vedas, Rig Veda, Yajurveda and Sama Veda. All the three is called. Yeah. You should remember that Sama Veda at 75%, nearly 75% of the mantras found in Sama Veda are from Rig Veda only. It is only from Rig Veda. There are altogether about 1,800 Rig mantras and more than 2,000 samans, and the vast majority of the contents are taken from Rig Veda itself. According to many, there are only nearly 80 or 85 mantras in Sama Veda, which are not found in Rigveda Samhita. Thank you, Namaskar. So thank you for the questions as well. Thank you, Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.